Good evening. I'd like to call the April 14th meeting to order. If you're able, please stand and we'll do our pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you like to go ahead and do the roll, please?
Mills.
Present.
McCombs.
Present.
Ryan. Jaretsky.
Present.
Martin.
Here.
Underwood.
Here.
Am I correct? We don't have any minutes. Oh, okay. Any comments or questions about the minutes? Dr. Martin?
Just on the roll call, under roll call, March 10th, it says Chairperson Linda Martin called the meeting to order. I don't think I was chair at that time.
Any other comments or questions about those minutes? Can we accept them with one correction needed?
Yep.
Anybody like to make a motion to accept the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed by the same sign? The minutes are accepted. Time for public comments. If you would like to step up to the microphone, state your name and what community you live in, and we'd love to hear from you. Not everybody at one time. Just anything you'd like to talk about. We'll have opportunity for people to step up forward.
With one note that we're having a public hearing after this, so if you're here to speak to anything, to the public hearing, please hold until we get to that public comment period. Okay. So this public comment period is for everything that's not in the public hearing.
Okay. Do we have anybody online with a question or comment? All right. Let's open up the public hearing.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair and the rest of the planning commissioners and members of the audience. I have a short presentation that will sort of outline this agenda item's, the purpose of the agenda item and kind of the process that we went through to develop the proposed amendments. And then if it's all right with council, then planning commission, we could open it up to the public for public comment. Sorry, I had a last minute malfunction of my thumb drive, so please excuse my out of breath and lateness to the podium. And hopefully everything else will go smoothly. Okay. So this first agenda item is some proposed amendments addressing vehicle and boat sales and repair in the Anacortes Municipal Code. The proposed order of events this evening is that, as I just mentioned, staff would give a brief briefing on the proposed amendments. Then we could hold the public hearing, and ultimately staff is requesting planning commission deliberation and potentially a recommendation to city council on the proposed amendments. So just a quick summary of the code proposal you have in your packet, an agenda bill and a staff report and proposed amendments that go through in detail what the issues are and what is being proposed. But just very quickly, The existing code excludes certain industrial support activities from locating in the industrial zone. So small-scale vehicle repair and small boat sales, which are both they're combined into a general service category of our permitted uses table in the Anacortes Municipal Code. The way that the code is currently set up, those types of uses would not be permitted in the industrial zone. And so that came to staff's attention, and so we put together these amendments for you to consider to potentially change that. So again, the issue is certain uses not being allowed under our current code, and then also the way that the code is currently structured makes it a bit complex and difficult to understand, both for staff and for members of the public. And so we'd like to just fix those inconsistencies to make things more clear for all involved. Staff's recommendation is to amend the Title 19 Unified Development Code to allow for a broader range of vehicle repair and boat repair and sales uses in the industrial zone, while prohibiting auto-oriented quick service uses, auto repair uses in that zone, and then also to resolve the code inconsistencies. And I'll get a little bit more into detail here on each of those items. So we're primarily talking about the industrial zone within city limits, and that is located in the area sort of bounded by R Avenue, 22nd Street. So this is a close-up of this area. So R Avenue to the west, 22nd Street to the north, approximately T Avenue, and then Fidalgo Bay to the east, and approximately 34th Street to the south. And so that pink area is our industrial zone. Prior to a major code reorganization and rewrite that occurred in 2019, repair uses were a permitted use within the industrial zone, and I just took a little excerpt out of the code from that period of time before 2019 to show how that was set up under permitted uses. We used to have a Title 17 where all of these things were, and you can see that permitted uses in the industrial zone included any industrial research and development, office repair, warehousing, processing, shipping terminal, and it goes on. So pretty broad allowances for different types of repair, and didn't specify, vehicle or boat or anything like that. And so, there are uses that have located, or that did locate in that zone under this older code, these code provisions. Staff does not think that the reorganization and rewrite in 2019 intended to exclude vehicle repair, certain vehicle repair and boat repair from this zone. And so that's part of the reason we're bringing these amendments forward. So this shows our current code, our table of permitted uses in the mixed use and industrial zones. So across the top, all of the mixed use and industrial zones, and then this is just an excerpt of some of the principal uses that are listed. You can see under the industrial zone column here, the general service category is blank under the I zone, so that typically means not permitted. So any sort of general service use that is not heavy service or public safety facility would not be permitted in industrial zone under our current code. So that's the way we read that right now. I can't get this microphone right. All right. So the general service category under our current code is a category of uses whose primary activity is the provision of service, rental, repair to boats, vehicles, appliances, tools, and it goes on, and then the code goes on to list specific uses in that category, which you can read here, but included in the category are small boat sales, rental, and repair, and also vehicle repair. And then also heavy service is one of those sub-uses that is all grouped into this larger general service use category. And the definition of heavy service is important because it actually changes how a general service use is classified and whether it is permitted in a particular zone or not. So if a particular general service use has any exterior service activities or exterior storage areas that are larger than 15,000 gross square feet or occupying an area larger than the size of the use's principal building, then that type of use is now classified as a heavy service use, and you would need to go to this category here to see if it's a permitted use in the particular zone. Does that make sense to everybody? It's a little bit confusing, but that's what we're dealing with right now and trying to make it a little more simple. So in order to address this particular issue, staff included some proposed amendments in attachment A to the staff report in your packet. I just took some screenshots from that, but essentially what the amendments would do is to unbundle the vehicle repair and boat repair from the overall general service category and list them out separately within this permitted use table so that it's more clear that those types of uses are permitted in these particular zones. And we also made it clear that these uses are permitted in the industrial zone by adding a P here. We also added some cross-references to the specific definitions. We created some new definitions to differentiate between minor and major vehicle repair, which I'll get to here in just a minute. Another cleanup item that comes along with these proposed amendments are to rework the vehicle and boat sales category of uses, which was also a little bit confusing, didn't clearly have these two uses broken out, the boat sales and vehicle sales rental. And so it made it hard to understand where these types of uses were permitted. So we created a separate subcategory under vehicle and boat sales for vehicle sales and rental, and we just carried down, we didn't change where that type of use is permitted. We just carried down the permitted, the P down to vehicle sales, and then we noticed that we were using different terms for marine and boat sales, which we think is intended to mean the same thing. So we just narrowed down those terms to one and are using boat sales and rental. And we'll get into the specific changes here. So in 1944-020, some additional changes to go along with the permitted use table amendments are to add a clarification about the effect of classifying a general service use as heavy service, because we felt like that was something that could get easily overlooked and has in the past. And so we added this sentence under the general service use category. That just notes that general service uses involving exterior activities that meet the definition of heavy service are classified as heavy service uses for purposes of determining whether they are permitted in a particular zone. So that's just kind of a clarification for the reader to be aware of that. We also are looking at cleaning up the list of the different general service uses by separating out small. Right now, the subtype is small boat sales, rental, and repair. And since we already had a marine, vehicle sales and repair, we felt that it made sense to move the boat sales down into that category instead of having it sort of hidden here under the general services. So this change basically leaves small boat repair as a permitted use in that general services category. And, excuse me. Okay, I see. So, and then we took we added a definition. So we said small boat repair and added the definition that is basically comprised of this information in parentheses here. So it's basically small boats are defined as boats that are capable of being transported on public roadways as a standard load without a special permit. So that's we had to do a little bit of research to figure out why those dimensions were included in the code. The 40 feet, 8.5 feet wide, and 14 feet tall. We weren't really sure why those were the dimensions. So we finally figured out that that size of boat and less is something that you can get on like a standard boat trailer and move it around without having to have like a heavy haul permit or special trailer. So we thought it might be useful to include that information in the definition too for future planners who had that same question. So this continues on in the general service category. We've created a new definition and subtypes for vehicle repair. So under vehicle repair, it made sense to have two sort of different types of repair that have different characteristics and impacts on the surrounding areas where they're able to be located, so that we can regulate them differently depending on the zone where they're permitted, and we can have more detail and in where those are located. So minor vehicle repair and major vehicle repair are the new terms that were developed to describe the two different types of uses. The minor vehicle repair is like your oil change, your quick service oil change, filter replacements, pretty auto-intensive, quick turnaround, the types of uses that are typically more appropriate for commercial areas and not, heavier industrial areas where you don't want to have a continuous stream of traffic coming through. And then major vehicle repair is basically everything else. So extensive mechanical, structural, or body-related repair or reconditioning of motor vehicles. In order to prohibit the quick minor vehicle repair type uses, we added a zone-specific standard for the industrial zone that just says that minor vehicle repair that's engaged in the rapid routine services such as oil changes, et cetera, is not a permitted use in the industrial zone. This is a clarification that I already sort of went over, where we have integrated, or excuse me, we changed the terminology from marine sales rental to boat sales and rental, just to be consistent through the code. And then right now, there is a zone-specific restriction on boat sales in the CBD zone that only small boats may be sold within that designation. So this little sentence here just achieves that zone-specific restriction. That's my description of the changes. As far as procedure, what has happened so far on these proposed amendments is that the Planning Department released the proposed draft on March 25th. The SEPA responsible official issued a SEPA determination of non-significance, and staff notified the Department of Commerce. We have to notify the state when the city is intending to amend its development regulations, so we completed that step. And we also published the notice of availability and written public comment period, public hearing in all the usual places. So tonight is the Planning Commission briefing, which I've just gone through, and the public hearing, and potentially recommendation, and then the next steps would be City Council consideration and adoption depending on the Planning Commission's recommendation. That's all I have, so I can sit down and see if the public has anything to say.
Do we have any public comments at this time? Please. Please state your name and the community you live in.
My name is John Willoughby. I live in Anacortes. I'm the owner of Zap ProLube and Automotive in Anacortes. I guess what I was here primarily to potentially provide any additional questions that you might have about my expertise and what we do in our field, some of the unique challenges we have with the properties that are located primarily Commercial Avenue on the island, as we're permitted to operate at this point. I mean, even some of the rural areas that are industrial in the county are still governed by the industrial zone of Anacortes. So technically, if you're even on the outskirts of town, you still wouldn't have, under the current zoning, the permission to work in some areas where it would seem logical that that sort of activity would be. So it really, for us, what we run into is, so let's say your car needs an engine. And in this, after post-COVID, things are not as readily available as they were before. Like if you need an engine on some of these cars, we wait 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks. So you can imagine that in the small spaces that you occupy on the Commercial Avenue area, there's nowhere to store that car when that's going on. So that's just a small example of some of the challenges we run into with spaces on the commercial corridor. It's very difficult to find a space large enough to do the type of work that we do. And in our business, we are part of the small repair. That's one aspect of our business where we do 40 to 50 cars a day. That obviously, would greatly impact traffic in those areas. So I can understand, because I've been down there, I have a boater, and so I understand with the large boats that they move around down that area, that wouldn't be ideal. But we do a lot of engine repair, and there's a lot of us that do that. You'll do engines, transmission repair, we do boat repair, we do machine work, we do rebuild boat trailers. A lot of, takes up a lot of space. There's really nowhere in town to take a motorhome. If you have a motorhome that needs repair, there's no property really large enough to get that vehicle in and actually work on it in town. Not reasonably anyway. It's pretty difficult. There's a couple places that are fortunate to be in the industrial zone now that have large enough facilities that can do that, but it's limited. So I was here primarily just to provide any questions anybody might have, and maybe that's not appropriate, but I thought I would be here to potentially lend any sort of input to that situation. So if there's not, that's all I would have to say about it.
Well, we appreciate you even making that offer.
No problem.
Any questions or comments from my Planning Commission members, since we do have some expertise, we have staff and we have expertise in the audience tonight. Mr. McCombs.
Mr. Chairman, so these changes would allow businesses to make those types of repairs, and they're currently not zoned for in the industrial, but they'd be able to do that now in the industrial area. Is that correct?
One more time on the question, I'm sorry.
The proposed changes would allow you to make those types of repairs, like an engine change or trailer repairs, in the industrial zone now.
The way I understand it, yes, we'd be allocated to be permitted to be in those zones. Now, the small, quick, like my oil change business, no.
Right.
They're exclusively removing that portion because of the traffic impact in those areas. So the stuff we're doing, like the boat trailers, engine repairs, diesel engine repairs, machine work, welding, exhaust work, any of that stuff would be done in those areas.
And technically, the way it's written currently, the ordinance is written, that you would not be able to do that.
We are not able to do that right now in any capacity, not by the zoning. Just for an example, like I have 2 buildings in town just to run my business. I have a property on 12th Street that I rent to do my major mechanical work, and then I've got the Quick Lube business on 23rd Street that we run both mechanical business out of and the Quick Lube out of there. So really a challenge to maintain. It's a very difficult thing to do, and to find space large enough to do what we're doing, that's, at least from my perspective, that's one of the great hurdles that I'm encountering.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair.
Dr. Martin,
So we're going to close the public hearing and then have a conversation
with staff and ourselves?
and ourselves?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks a lot.
All right, we'll close the meeting, public meeting, and we'll allow Planning Commission members to discuss, ask questions, and ask the staff questions. Dr. Martin, you look like you're ready.
I have a question. It has to do with the definitions under vehicle repair. The minor vehicle repair includes things like the diagnostics, fluid service, tire and battery work, etc. So you can, with the minor vehicle repair, you can do tire replacement, you can replace batteries, you can rotate tires, replace batteries. But you can't change oil because,
It's a quick service.
yeah, something just didn't seem quite right. If when I take my car in, I want the oil changed and the tires rotated.
Excuse me. No, the intent is that this would cover oil change as well. That might not have come through. You're talking about the minor vehicle repair definition?
Yeah, because we're not allowing an oil change place, or we're not recommending an oil change place in the industrial zone, right? Am I right?
That's correct, yeah. The types of services like a quick lube oil change facility, we are recommending not be permitted in the industrial zone.
That's what, it just seems, again, just for me, I don't know very much about this, but I know that when I take my car in to change the oil, I usually get the tires rotated. So if I'm with this proposal, if I'm in the industrial zone, I can get my tires rotated and my oil changed. But if I'm in the CBD zone, I can only get my oil changed and not my tires rotated?
No, the intent is that minor vehicle repair includes oil changes and tire replacement, tire rotations, and that those types of facilities would only be allowed to locate in commercial, I think it's commercial zones is where those are permitted right now. So we're trying to avoid establishing new quick service, high turnover, like the oil change and the tire rotation service facilities in the industrial zone, because the intent of the industrial zone is more heavier, more intensive repair. There is a lot of, activities that are going on in the industrial zone where we don't want to have a lot of traffic coming in to go to a quick turnover type facility. Does that?
Yeah, okay. I get that. It didn't, it seemed confusing, and maybe I'm the only one that's confused. I don't know.
Okay. Well, would it help if we included oil change as an example in that minor vehicle repair definition? Is that what's?
Well, if I were Mr., is it Woolley? Willoughby. If I was Mr. Willoughby, I might read that and say, I'm a minor, whatever you call it. I'm a minor vehicle repair shop because I also do oil changes and rotate tires. So I'm a minor vehicle repair shop, and so a customer like me could go to his Jiffy Lube kind of place in the industrial zone. Do you see what I'm saying? It just seemed confusing.
So what you're saying is the uses such as tire rotation and quick oil changes currently are listed as minor vehicle repair, and minor vehicle repair we are proposing to allow in the industrial zone. But
Correct.
what we're trying to do is not have the quick places.
Right.
And so this might require a little tweaking.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now. I was thinking that this, yeah, I see that there's a P here, so I can see how that would be confusing.
I understand the thought behind it, and it makes perfect sense to me. It just seems confusing in the wording, or something seems, to me, confusing.
So the way around it is we allow minor vehicle repair. We're proposing to allow minor vehicle repair in the industrial zone. However, if you got to go down to the zone-specific standards, which says oil changes, lube, filter replacement, and other short-duration maintenance is prohibited. So that is a little bit confusing to allow it in one sentence, but then have to go someplace else to see that it's actually not allowed. So I can see where that's confusing.
Yeah, I can too. And maybe a potential way to remedy that is to just say that minor vehicle repair is not a permitted use in the industrial zone. And I do think that under the major vehicle repair definition, it does allow minor repairs when they're part of another type of major repair. So that kind of covers, situations where you're kind of doing the whole thing. So that could be something that we can look at, is just taking that P out in the industrial zone.
Or Mr. McCombs is pretty good at
Yeah.
wordsmithing too. So,
Well, I think that's a mistake, because I think in the course of doing a minor vehicle repair, you're going to do all of those things like change oil, change your filter, and rotate tires. So I think I don't think you want to exclude those necessarily from the minor. So I like the way it's written, actually. I think we need to be more, I think, let me say this chronologically. I think the minor vehicle repair is well-written, because those things probably need to happen in the course of doing a minor vehicle repair, like changing the oil and all that. But I think where you need to probably focus is the high customer turnover vehicle repair. I think needs to be spelled out that's not allowed because of I think that makes sense. It's not allowed because of the high customer turnover, but I think I think that's where you need to make the distinction in terms of the definition, so that you're not excluding something that you probably want those things happening in the industrial zone and not in your commercial zone, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
So I think I picked up something in what you're saying is, in the process of doing a major vehicle repair, you're doing all sorts of minor vehicle repair. So in the major vehicle repair section, we added a line, that last line that says, minor repairs are only allowed when part of a major repair. So does that address what you were trying to get at?
No, because then you're saying, hey, you can only rotate your tires if you're gonna do some body work on your car, right? But I may send my car to the minor repair all day, and I'm not pulling the engine. But you know, I may have so many minor repairs that I'm doing, changing all of the fluids, just flushing the radiator, changing the back me up, changing the catalytic converter, or I have to put a new muffler on there. And those things are minor vehicle repairs that are probably, your car may be in there all day, and it's not high customer turnover, so you're not getting the congestion that you're trying to avoid in the industrial area. But, so I don't think you want to exclude those things, but I think you need to write that. I think what you, like, in that section B, where you have minor repairs are only allowed when part of a major repair, I would say that the work that you're doing in terms of the, where you talk about, where's the high customer turnover, where you're talking about oil change, lubrication, filter replacement, tire rotations should only be done when part of a minor vehicle repair, if that makes sense. I think you could add that to the end of the part A, and now you don't have the Jiffy Lube, Zap Lube type, setup where customers are rolling in and out every 20 minutes, but you're still allowing those functions to happen as part of a vehicle repair.
So, yeah, I mean, it brings up a lot of questions. Is a muffler shop, where it might take them a little while, it's not high turnover,
You're talking several hours probably, right?
but that's a really good question. Is that something that should be allowed in the industrial zone, or do we want to continue to keep those types of uses in the commercial zone where because there's still, a fair amount of turnover on that versus, dropping off a vehicle and picking up the next day for sure when you're having a major repair done, your transmission being fixed. And they might be done at the end of the day, might be a day and a half. So where do we draw that line?
Say minor vehicle repairs, anything you're not going to do in your own driveway. Yeah, most folks aren't going to do a muffler in their own driveway, but I can easily do a oil change in my own driveway, right? So.
Dr. Martin.
Mr. Dretzky, which also brings up the point, this is Anacortes, and do we have a lineup of customers coming out, down the street to get oil changes in Anacortes?
Yes.
Do we? Yes. Okay, then I withdraw my question.
Tire stores, bad idea. Oil change business, bad idea. Both attract 50, 60 people a day each. A lot of 50 unique visits at the loop per day. In the summer, the cars are poured out on 23rd Street. So yes, that would be there. They want to keep that out of there, which I totally understand. But if you came down, those facilities aren't really designed.
I think we should have you up to the microphone because we're recording this meeting.
So those services that you're talking about, the facilities are specifically designed to handle a 20-minute customer. Like if you have a rack that you're lifting the car and you're doing an oil change on stuff, that's getting a multi-point inspection. The tire rotation and oil change is more, I would say it's an hour service, right? So you're going to spend about an hour on that. It's not going to be quick. You can't do that many of them a day. I think if you put a cap on a situation like that where you didn't allow more than 20 cars a day in that area or something like that might be a better way to address it as opposed to a sure service, right? So if you said, okay, based on an average of 20 cars a day, we don't want any more down there than that, that would sort of remedy, I think, your issue. And I would say that if you're doing oil change and a tire rotation and we're checking brakes and we're doing that sort of a thing, that's not what I would classify as a quick service. An oil change is an oil change and a multi-point inspection. We'll wash the car, you're out of there in 25, 30 minutes. think that's different, if that makes sense. I know what you're saying with the tire rotation, you want it every time, but it's that, you can't come to Zap and get that done in a moment's notice. That's probably a 3-hour window, because we have to get a rack free. It's just a little more complicated than a quick routine maintenance. Thank you.
But if you're going to do both, that forces you to have 2 locations.
I don't want to do oil changes down there. That would be a cumbersome and a hassle, and the men that are there and the women that are there, be too expensive to have them do those services. So frankly,
But if you want to do any more serious repairs, the ones that take longer, they're going to be going to the industrial area, correct?
that's right. That's
Right,
where I'm going to direct
So
everybody.
that forces you to have 2 locations.
I will have 2 locations anyway, because my building that I'm on 23rd Street is designed to do the quick loop. To reduplicate that and rebuild that down there I have no interest in that. I'm really well established, just for my own personal, like where I'm established, I'm in a good spot. I got 2 locations. I drop people off Commercial Avenue. It turns them to my mechanic shop. So for me, the mechanic shop could be anywhere. It doesn't need to be, frontage, because I have frontage and a great clientele of people. So for me, it's more, where do we get this big mechanical work done? Where can we do motorhomes? Where can I do the engine repair in an area where I have enough space to do what we need to do? That's sort of the challenge.
Okay.
So-
So you're totally resigned to the fact that if you want to do both, you're going to be in 2 locations.
Correct. If I'm going to be doing lubes, it's going to be up there. And when lubes stop, which it's someday, I guess with electric cars, that's a very good potential. I mean, it's very possible that this is a 10, 15-year window, and then that changes. So looking at the future, tires, I think, would be that's a lot of people that draws from tires too. I mean, if you look at Les Schwab, you'll go in there in the summertime, there's going to be 35 cars in their parking lot and people roaming around looking to get tires fixed and stuff. So that would be an example of where that would be probably not a great place to put a store like that. But when you're doing the diagnostic work, for instance, that can be really complex. That can be really time-consuming, multiple days, waiting on modules, waiting on computers. There's a lot of time, spent trying to pin those down. So that part probably is not a small service. That's probably more larger, long-term storage, long-term repair, and high skill level. So the quick stuff is like the radiator flush, the oil change, the things like that, I think, are what they're concerned with is the volume of people. I think if you look at the other shops down there, they're long-term repair facilities. You're in there, their average repairs are probably 3.5 to 5 hours per car. That's what I think you'd look at that, and I would think we're going to be in the same position. We're still going to do oil change, but you're there for other things. I mean, like I said, frankly, I would rather you go back actually to my other shop, get the oil change, and then come down to the main shop and get the mechanic work done, because the employees are really expensive. You can't have them doing those sorts of services. It's just not, it financially doesn't work. So ideally, they're going where the quick lube guys are. They're getting that work done in those facilities and eliminating the traffic.
Thank you.
You bet.
Do we define, does not include prolonged outdoor storage? At what point does waiting for parts, and I hear stories about people waiting a month to get parts sent from out of the country, waiting for a factory in Japan to send some part for a Toyota. I've been there, so I know that's possible. So what's the definition of a prolonged outdoor storage? Waiting for the shop to be able to actually do the work you want them to do.
Well, we don't have that defined.
We don't define it? Okay.
Where did you see that one? I'm sorry. Was that under minor? Thank
Under
you.
minor. It's the very last sentence under minor.
So not include vehicle, include repair activities defined under minor. Outdoor storage of vehicles. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be difficult to put a definition on that. I mean, I think it's better probably to leave that general, but as a characteristic of that type of use, if it's not, if the car isn't getting in for service within a day or two, that's kind of what my mind goes to.
Mr. Judzki.
Dr. Martin?
So maybe that last sentence under minor vehicle repair, this use does not include repair activities defined under blah, 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 or service activities such as oil change or something. The oil change isn't really a repair, it's a service activity. So maybe that would make it more clear?
Would you rather use the word maintenance?
Or no, because you can do maintenance under minor vehicle repair. Tire rotation is maintenance. I don't know, just a thought to maybe put the word of service, when you're servicing a vehicle, is not what we want under the vehicle repair section.
Mr. Chair, actually, I think if you read 2A, the industrial zone, minor vehicle repair uses primarily engage in rapid routine services such as oil changes, lubrication, filter replacement. It's pretty well spelled out, I think. Maybe that needs to be included in section 1A, but I think it pretty much spells out the intent, and I think it also clarifies that, hey, what's the difference between what we're talking about with minor vehicle repair and what we're talking about with rapid routine services.
So, just so I can clarify, are you suggesting to integrate that language into the minor vehicle repair definition to talk about the rapid routine services such as oil change, lubrication, and filter? Because then that would allow us to get rid of.
I think we could consider putting that as underneath 1A. I don't know if you might have it as a additional subsection, right? 1A.1 or 1A.A, whatever the convention is.
Okay. So yeah, I think that I still am getting a little bit hung up on what Commissioner Martin brought up with the, having the P in the industrial zone for the minor vehicle repair. If we were to further clarify the definition to include the things that you just said and then remove the P from the industrial zone for minor vehicle repair, would that accomplish what we're hoping? I don't want to create a gap where we have, rapid minor vehicle repair and then major vehicle repair, and I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't know if there's something in the middle that we're missing, or a gap of services that wouldn't be covered by all of those things or by those definitions.
No, I think you want to include minor vehicle repair as permitted use. But what we're saying is that the rapid vehicle service is not part of that minor vehicle repair, unless it's included with other repairs, right?
In the scope of other
Right,
maintenance
yeah.
and repairs.
Because you don't want to exclude, if you say no oil changes, now I'm changing my oil pump or my water pump, and I'm changing my oil pan, and I'm doing that in one facility, and then I got to drag my car over to the commercial zone to change the oil, right? Like, that's not where we want to be, so.
Mr. Chair. So I think what I'm hearing is we can leave the table as it is, leave the definitions in G1A and B as they are, and take the zone-specific standard in 2A and just move that up into the minor vehicle repair, so it's more obvious for people that in the industrial zone, minor vehicle repair use is primarily engaged. I think that primarily engaged is really important there, because now it's really clear that, yeah, you can do oil changes in the industrial zone, but you can't have an oil change shop. I might also add tire repair and replacement to that, so we don't want a Les Schwab down there. But if that's not the primary thing that they're doing, they're rebalancing your tires or doing alignments, or if they're you're repairing a tire while you have it in there doing other work, that's fine, but we don't want specifically a tire shop. So by including that primarily engaged in language, what's in currently 2A, I think that really covers it pretty tightly.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
are there other zone-specific standards that we're having to take into consideration, or is that the only one for this?
Oh, that is the only one for vehicle repair.
And
Right now, we currently don't have any definition or zone-specific standards for that type of use.
So moving it in won't make others on their own in the category?
Say that last part again.
I want to make sure that if, it sounds like we're moving it into the definition of the minor vehicle repair, and if that happens, we're not excluding any other zone-specific standards that would be left over, that goes away?
Correct. I think that the format of the current format of our code is that we have, under the definite terms and definitions are the more general, this is what this use is. And then if we're going to add special conditions for particular zones, that's in a separate section. So to move a standard that only applies in the industrial zone up under the minor definition repair would be, I'd need to think about how to do that without being inconsistent with the rest of how we have our code formatted, if that makes sense. But yeah, I don't think we're not leaving any other zone-specific standards behind. This is the only one. And also just noting that, let's see. We're only keeping, so under general service right now, all vehicle repair is permitted. So it's already permitted in CBD, commercial, marine mixed use, CM2, commercial marine and LM. It's just the only zone that it's not permitted in is the industrial zone. I don't know if that's, there might be further code work to look at whether we have those zones right, or, if we need to make some changes there. We were trying to, facilitate this amendment to make it clear that in the industrial zone, yes, all vehicle repair except for the quick turnover is permitted. But, technically, with this amendment, we don't really need to separate them into the two categories. I think it will be useful in the future if we do further code amendment work for vehicle repair to further define what zones are appropriate for the different levels of repair. So I wanted to put that out there. Not that that helps at all, but just explain the kind of the thinking behind why we had two different categories.
Mr. McCombs.
So I'm just looking at the staff memo, or the attachment A there. And then general service, there's no P in the industrials. That's part of the proposal, right? Is it
Yeah.
general?
So currently,
Or is that's these are all, these are all subheaded under there.
yeah,
Okay.
it gets confusing. So right now, they're
Okay.
all, grouped in under the general service use, and so not permitted in the industrial zone. So we're trying to clarify that those, by splitting them out under general service, we're saying general service is not permitted in the industrial zone, except for all of these uses are permitted.
Okay.
So the structure of the code makes it, makes it a little bit difficult to easily accomplish that, but
Libby, would you go to the next slide? Maybe the one after that, Ben. Okay. Okay, there, yeah. So you see G, vehicular repair. G should be underlined too, because right now there is no G in 1944-020. So that G should be blue and underlined. That is new. So everything under G is new.
yes.
Including the number 2 down there, which is zone-specific standards. So we could just, like, if we're not affecting the code if we get rid of that number 2 there and move the 2A part up into minor vehicle repair, it doesn't throw off the rest of the code. You were asking that question earlier.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It looks like that is underlined very faintly. I'm not sure why it came out like that, but under the zone-specific standards, that is new.
And actually, this is in 020, right?
This is in, yes, under general service category.
And so under that F there should also be capitalized by small boat repair, or not capitalized, blue and underlined.
I don't know how to accomplish that, but
Yeah,
yes.
I'm just getting that out in the record
It's
so
true.
that the commissioners understand that those are new sections and we're
Yes.
not deleting anything that was there before.
Yeah, and these little explainer boxes are, also trying to point out where things are changed and the rationale for changing them, but probably could have done a better job saying that this is a completely new section.
Yeah, those blue boxes do not appear in the code when we're done.
Yep.
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Martin?
I move that we approve the proposed changes, amendments to this code as discussed, with the one minor structural change proposed by Mr. Coleman, and that we recommend that we move that forward to the City Council.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mills?
a second.
Would you like to take roll for the motion?
Mills?
Wait a minute.
Support.
Can I ask one more question, Mr.
Of course.
So, just to clarify one other point on the permitted uses, like the last part of the attachment A talks about boat sales and rental. And then in the matrix, it does not show, I have a P in industrial for boat sales and rental, but not for vehicle sales and rental. Our proposal would include a P, it'd be a permitted use in industrial for vehicle sales and rental as well, right?
No, it would not. Not as a
not part-
primary use.
So that's not part of the proposal?
That's not part of the proposal. The vehicle sales and rental could be an accessory use to a primary major vehicle repair use. But if we added a P there, then that would allow a primary, like a car dealership.
Okay, so that's
As a
not the
primary
intent.
use, right.
And then, but a boat sales and rental is permitted then?
Correct. And it's currently permitted. We're not making any
Okay.
changes there.
Does definition in C there, does that exclude the sale of a 16-foot or less boat? Or is that the intent, is to, an establishment cannot sell a boat under 16 feet? Or as long as they're selling boats over 16 feet, they could sell a 12-foot boat?
The intent here is that boats that are less than 16 feet are more like, kayaks and canoes and things that are, more of a retail sales use. And so that's where those types of uses are classified as a retail use.
So is it
So-
excluding that? If I'm already selling boats over 16 feet, I can't sell anything under 16 feet?
I don't think so, no. I
Okay.
mean, I think if it's, if primarily you're engaged in selling boats that are, larger than 16 feet, then that,
Obviously, you've never gone crabbing in a 12-foot boat.
no.
It can be an adventure.
Yeah.
That was actually 2 questions, so
Okay,
apologies.
you're good.
So for clarification, I want to make sure that we understand the motion. So recommend approval of the code as drafted, with the exception that we're moving what is currently 2A up into what is currently 5.2A. We're moving that text into G1A. And in addition, we're adding tire repair and replacement to that, what is currently under 2.1A.
I didn't want to say that we're putting it under G1A just because Libby's question about how to keep that consistent. So I just trust you guys can work out how you're going to make that change and still keep the intent.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the motion is to leave it as is, just add tire repair and replacement to 2A.
No. The motion is to keep the intent as is and make whatever structural changes are needed. In other words, if you want to put the 2A under the minor vehicle repair, that's fine with me, or however you want to do it to keep it consistent with the rest of the code.
Okay.
That's the motion-ish.
Okay, well, I will just, I will just say that the current format of the code is to have where you have a use that is permitted except in certain circumstances because it's in a specific zone. The format of our code right now has all of those specific conditions and standards under zone-specific standards. It wouldn't typically be included in the definition. So is the intent of moving the language about minor repair, engaged in rapid routine services, moving it up into the minor vehicle repair definition only to make it so that it's more readily available for the user to see that it's different in the industrial zone, or are we intending to change the overall definition of minor vehicle repair? What is intended to be accomplished?
I think the intent is to clarify what a minor vehicle repair is and isn't.
Okay.
So minor vehicle repair is those things, but it is not a establishment primarily engaged in rapid routine oil changes, lubes, tire rotations, right?
Yes. Okay.
So then we would need to likely develop another term to cover those types of uses if it's not minor repair or major repair. And that's something that we could do.
That's the idea of service.
Yeah. We could add a vehicle service use that incorporates this language in the industrial zone specific standard. I'm not wanting to add a lot more uses, but I'm not quite sure how to address this without doing that.
I'm going to go back on what I said earlier, just kind of rethinking about the code from my perspective is it makes sense to have the zone-specific standards listed underneath. My worry would be that somehow it got separated where a person wouldn't know to look underneath to see where that definition is. And I'm not sure, I think the intent is to try and get that language into the upper definition, but I understand that it's the intent of the the use in the zone, not the definition that we're trying to change. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
And I just realized that one thing that we can do is in the permitted use matrix, we reference 1944-020G, which is our new section. But we could also, or we should reference 44-020G2 here. In the cross-reference, we would typically have like a little X or a little notation that says, hey, there's something special about this particular one that you need to read about. So we could do that to make it more clear. We should have done that.
To me, that solves that, just because you're now cross-referencing it.
Would that X be in both minor vehicle repair and major vehicle repair?
No, it would just be under minor vehicle repair.
Okay.
So there would be, we would add an X, superscript X here after the P under the industrial zone, and add a reference to 1944, or add the superscript X here with the reference to 1944-020G2A. So that would lead you to, here's the standards in the industrial zone.
That works for me.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mills?
at the risk of muddying the waters further, are we trying to distinguish in our terminology? In 1A, we say fluid service, in 2A, we say oil changes. Are we trying to make a distinction between those two?
Not intentionally. We could change that to make them consistent terms.
I would.
Yeah.
We have a motion on the table. Shall we take the roll? A motion and a second.
You should restate it.
I'm sorry?
Good for you. Restate it.
Yeah, maybe we'll have Dr. Martin restate it, the motion.
Okay. I recommend that we move forward to the City Council the proposed amendments to the vehicle repair and sales as presented, with, again, a minor structural change to, in this case now, to the table.
We need to have a second again.
I don't know.
Well, let's have a second again, please.
So moved, or so seconded.
Okay. I think we're ready for roll call.
Mills,
Yes.
McCombs,
Yes.
Dretzky,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Underwood.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right. Moving right along.
Yeah. So the next agenda item is the Shoreline Master Program. Let's see if I can just pull up the agenda. Okay. Item 6A, other business, Shoreline Master Program update, review of proposed amendments and project status. So you may recall at the last meeting, staff provided an overview of the, just generally the Shoreline Management Act and the purpose of that are requirements under the Shoreline Management Act to have a shoreline master program for the city that regulates development within shoreline jurisdiction. So that was kind of just a overview of that body of legislation and the requirements for the city. Tonight, we wanted to get a little bit into more detail and talk about the periodic update that was started in 2019 and has been delayed for a bit. But I would like to, let's see. All right, here's the purpose. To provide a status update of the Shoreline Master Program periodic update, so the one that was begun in 2019 and still continues. Adoption has been delayed. We'll summarize the work that's been completed to date as part of that process and do an overview of what the actual proposed amendments are within the last public draft that was released in 2022, and then talk briefly about the next steps in the update process. So just a quick recap that the Shoreline Master Program is required by the Shoreline Management Act, which is a state law. The Anacortes SMP must be reviewed and updated at least every 10 years. The purpose of that review and update is to ensure that our plan is consistent with state law, changes in guidance in state law, and also looking at changed local conditions, priorities, new and improved data or information, and changes in city regulations and plans. Just looking at kind of the overall plans and regulations of the city and making sure that the Shoreline Master Program is consistent with all of the changes that have occurred since the last update, which was in 2010. The state law, Shoreline Management Act, contains the procedural review rules for Shoreline Master Program amendments, so it's a little bit different than the comprehensive plan update and development regulation updates under the Growth Management Act. For the Shoreline Master Program, the city coordinates with the Department of Ecology throughout the process on the proposed amendments, and then ultimately the Department of Ecology reviews the locally adopted Shoreline Master Program and provides the final approval of the plan, and only then is it effective. So that's a final step that is involved in the SMP update that is not in our GMA comprehensive plan update process. And there are a couple of different review processes that a local jurisdiction can choose to follow. In 2019, when we initially began the periodic update of the SMP, the city followed the joint review process that's provided for in the statute that allows sort of a concurrent review by local jurisdiction and ecology, so that we're doing a joint public comment period and a joint public hearing with Planning Commission and the Department of Ecology, whereas the other option is to go through the full local process, adoption process, then the plan goes to ecology and they have a separate public comment period. So it can be a little bit longer process. But the city chose to do the joint process as part of the most recent work on the SMP update. Substantial progress was made toward completing the periodic update from 2019 to 2022, and I mentioned last time that adoption of the update was delayed for various reasons, including appeals of the critical areas regulations, which were intended to be integrated into the SMP. So the last time we updated our critical areas regulations, an appeal of that affected our ability to adopt the SMP because they were connected. Excuse me. Yeah. So just a reminder of where the Shoreline Master Program applies within Anacortes. This is a map showing the shoreline environment designations for all of the different shoreline reaches, they're called. So all marine shorelines are subject to the SMP, including in-water areas, which have an aquatic designation, and then landward 200 feet from the ordinary high water mark. So those shoreland areas are also included in shoreline jurisdiction. So marine shorelines, and then we also have some lakes that are subject to the SMP, as well as some associated wetlands. So just to summarize some of the work that has been completed between the period of 2019 and 2022, there was significant public outreach that occurred, consistent with the public participation plan that was adopted to help us engage the public throughout the process. There were open houses, several open houses. One of them was in person, the other was online because we hit the COVID pandemic halfway through this process as well. There was also coordination between the city staff and different agencies that have comment or have an interest or jurisdiction over different work in shoreline areas, and then tribal coordination and outreach also occurred. As part of the update process in 2019, the city hired a consultant to help us with the update. The consultant developed what's called a gap analysis, where they looked at the SMP update state requirements. So Department of Ecology came up with a checklist that identified all of the changes that have occurred to state law since the last time the SMP was updated. And then they also the consultant, so that looked at where there are gaps in our current shoreline regulations and policies, and identified changes that need to be made based on those. And then also looked at, as I mentioned, all of our local plans and regulations and other conditions that may have changed since the last update, and made recommendations or suggestions for updates to address those things. And so the amendments that were proposed were based on the gap analysis findings and the input that we got from the public and agencies over the course of the open house and multiple drafts of the SMP that were put out for public review. Oh, and I already talked about that, public and agency input. So the city staff did coordinate with the Department of Ecology through the joint review process and submitted the second draft of the proposed updates to Ecology for what's called an initial determination. So the Department of Ecology takes a look at the record that's been developed, the public comments, the city's responses, the proposed amendments, and makes an initial determination on whether the proposal complies with the Shoreline Management Act and Ecology guidance for the update. And Ecology did issue an initial determination back in 2021. I won't go through this in detail, but this is just to kind of put some dates to all of the items that I just talked about. In case you're interested, you can go back and take a look at all of the work that has occurred on the update. So the most recent version of the SMP proposed amendments that was released for public review and comment was the third draft. And that was released back in, this is the public notice for that release. That was in September 21st, 2022. And the comment period on that ended October 12th, 2022. This page is showing the first, this slide is showing the first page of draft 3, just to show you what it looks like, of the development regulations, and then the shoreline element of the comprehensive plan, which is where all of the goals and policies from the SMP will go. Okay, I already talked about that. So just, I know that you were probably looking forward to the 85 slides in the PowerPoint presentation in your packet, but I had some second thoughts, and I think I'm going to try and not go through each and every one, but they're there in case we need to go to a specific amendment. But I'm trying to just summarize the key amendments. So I've made some changes to my PowerPoint. So as I mentioned, there are a couple of different categories of amendments that are proposed within the draft. And kind of my point with going through these are to bring everybody up to speed with what's already happened, and what is in the current draft SMP, which is kind of what our baseline or what we're working from moving forward. So everybody kind of has a common understanding of what's happened and where we're at right now before we move forward. So the types of amendments that are proposed within the draft include a structural reorganization of the goals and policies and the regulations that are within the SMP, and I'll get a little more detailed with that in a minute. They address consistency with state law, other issues for consideration, and integration of critical areas regulations. So all of these items are addressed in the gap analysis that I mentioned already, that our consultant prepared back in 2020. They were called the Watershed Company back then. They have a different name now. But that document is available on our website and kind of goes through, here's all of the changes to state law, here's where the SMP has some gaps, here's what the change needs to be to address and be consistent with state law. And then also, as I mentioned, identifying other areas for consideration to just make improvements to administration of the SMP, clarifications, and other things like that. So the first big change that you'll see with the draft is that it proposes to move from a standalone shoreline master program document, which is one big PDF that lives on the website, and it includes all the information about the Shoreline Management Act. It includes all of the goals and policies for the different elements, and it includes the development regulations for all of the different elements. So with this update, we propose to reorganize the goals and policies from the standalone document into a new element within the comprehensive plan. So it would be a new shoreline element. So basically just relocating all of the policies into the comp plan, new shoreline element, and relocating all of the development regulations from the SMP into our Title 19 development regulations within the Anacortes Municipal Code. Excuse me. And the intent with doing that, or proposing that, was to put all of the city's policies about growth and development and shorelines all within one document, the comprehensive plan. Technically, the Shoreline Master Program goals and policies are a part of our comprehensive plan. They just don't live in that plan right now. So it would relocate all of those goals and policies into the comp plan along with all of the other elements of the comprehensive plan. And then the regulations, which are the actual rules for what can happen on the ground in shoreline jurisdiction would be moved to Title 19. It used to be a reserved section, but there's I think it's 1972, is reserved specially for shoreline regulations. So all of the rules and regulations that a person would need to know for developing or establishing a use on their property in shoreline jurisdiction would now all be within one document, which I think is super helpful. It's helpful for staff, and I think makes more sense for applicants and the public when they go looking for the rules that apply to their property, not to have to look at multiple documents. And that reorganization is consistent with the Regulatory Reform Act that the legislature adopted way back in 1995, and this is just a graph from, or a illustration from the Shoreline Master Program Handbook that the Department of Ecology puts out, just showing that SMPs are part of the local comprehensive plan and development regulations. So this will just facilitate that integration further and make it easier for property owners, public, and staff to use. This is another document that is available on the website, but I'm not going to go through it. But something that can get a little bit confusing and kind of tracking the different iterations of the draft amendments are that the first two amendment proposals that were put out in the format of the standalone SMP, so that same numbering scheme and that same format. So we wanted to figure out what all the changes were going to be before we converted the goals and policies into the shoreline element of the comp plan in that format, and the development regulations numbering scheme, which is the 1972, the code numbering scheme. So this is a crosswalk that shows the existing Shoreline Master Program standalone document and all of its chapters and sections, and then it shows the proposed new location organization under the comp plan or the development regulations. So that's kind of the major structural reorganization. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So next I'll get into the actual proposed.
Hang on, Debbie.
Yeah.
Just one quick question. So the goals and policies are going into the comp plan, the development regulations into Title 19, 1972. What about the environment designations? Is that also in?
The environment designations will be a map similar to the zoning map that is referenced in the code. So it'll be it'll be within the development regulations.
Okay.
Yes, we have the capability to do that now with our code revisor abilities of putting illustrations directly into the online code.
Okay, thanks.
So the proposed amendments to the goals, policies, and regulations. So again, the gap analysis goes through all of these in detail. You can look at the third draft of the SMP, the full document update, and you'll find the regular format that we use with strike through underline showing what the changes are. It's in the new format with the new code numbering system, and but it's the same text and content, so you can track what's proposed to be changed versus what is existing. So just a summary of the amendments that are proposed for consistency with state law. So these are the different laws that have changed since the last time the periodic update was undertaken. The last update was adopted in 2010. The review of state law updates, currently the gap analysis looked at 2007 through 2019. Obviously, there are some years that have happened between 2019 and now, so we'll be taking a look at what has changed since the gap analysis was completed and addressing any changes there as part of this update process. But this just lists out all of the changes that are proposed responding to the state law changes through 2019. I mean, I don't think I'll read them unless you'd like me to. Okay. So there are quite a few. The gap analysis shows what all of the changes were to the state law. It shows whether the current 2010 SMP is consistent, and then it has a column that says here's what's recommended to be changed to be consistent with the changes, or there's no change necessary, or some response like that. So I mentioned the ecology's initial determination of the consistency with the proposed amendment. So all I've done is taken that document and pasted a screenshot of the document because it does a really good job of summarizing all of the proposed changes. So chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the SMP are primarily addressing administration, introduction, scope, jurisdictions, exemptions. And so this kind of summarizes what changes are proposed within each of those sections. Most of them are addressing changes in state law. So I won't go through all those. There are some proposed changes to the shoreline environment designation map. And I can just go quickly through those right now. I'll have a better quality version of this later, but the first one is, what's that one? That's one, yeah, in the Ship Harbor area. So Edwards Way comes down to Guimas Channel here. There's the cul-de-sac that people park in to use the Guimas Channel Trail and the Ship Harbor boardwalk area to the west. So this yellow area here is, you can kind of see the faint outline of the cul-de-sac here. But it is currently designated as urban. And that was a remnant of older comprehensive plan and shoreline plans that anticipated some different uses for that area than what actually occurred, and ultimately, what it can really support. And so the proposal with the change here is to change the designation from urban to sorry. A CD segment is now zoned R2A. Also, thank you. I'm refreshing my memory about all of this. Yeah, so this, yeah. So that is proposed to be changed to conservancy. This says is now zoned R2A, which is not consistent with the urban designation. So the proposal is to change this designation from urban to conservancy. I'm not seeing where it says that on here, so I might need to update that map. But that would be, I'm sorry, conservancy along the first 100 feet, which is consistent with what's happening to the east of the cul-de-sac. And that has some more, it's more restrictive in terms of what can be allowed within that first 100 feet. And then shoreline residential would be the second 100 feet. So it would match what is currently designated to the east of the cul-de-sac to be consistent with the future land use designation for that area and actual uses that have been developed in the area. The second change is to this area along Guaymas Channel. The shoreline environment designation, the yellow, again, is urban, and then the red is shoreline residential. And so the proposed change is to change the urban, which extends to the ordinary high water mark. It doesn't go out into the aquatic designation below the ordinary high water, but it would change urban to shoreline residential, which is, right now there's a conflict between the future land use designation for that section, which is, it's a residential designation, I don't remember which one, I think R2 or R2A. So it would change that yellow strip to shoreline residential to be consistent with existing land use designation. And that was definitely we can get into it another time, but a conversation with the Department of Ecology, who did have concerns about that change and how it would affect the ability of the canneries over the, aquatic, the overwater canneries and ability to continue or establish, marine water-dependent related uses there. They wanted to make sure that they're changing this to residential wasn't going to, preclude future potential use of those canneries. The other
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mills.
question on the previous, the proposed change, I want to move it down. Can you there we go. In the cannery section, section 2, that's along a territory where we've been trying for years to complete the Guaymas Channel Trail. Would this proposed change impact that effort positively or negatively?
I don't believe that it would impact that. I haven't looked at that issue recently, but a trail or recreational use is permitted in either one of those shoreline environment designations.
I know last Thursday at the Chamber luncheon with the state of the city, the mayor said that's one of his priorities is to continue trying to successfully complete that trail.
Yeah, I just didn't want us to make a change that would make that more difficult.
Yeah, I remember that is something that we looked at during the update process, but I'm not remembering all the details of things. But we'll make sure to look at that again with fresh eyes and make sure that everything is consistent. So the other area that is proposed for a change is just this area down right along the northeast portion of Lake Erie. There's just a couple of private properties down there to the south of the forest lands where a few years ago we had a permit application that came in to develop a house, and we realized, oh, this doesn't actually have a shoreline environment designation. And so there are procedures for how you deal with that in the SMP, but this change would just address that and formally designate the properties that are missing a designation as conservancy. Or I guess it's just one property.
Is that inside the city limits?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they extended that far south. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Dr. Martin.
that Lake Erie that you are designating there, is that where they have a camp?
Not that I'm aware of, unless it's something that's occurred after there was a permit for a single-family home, which is, maybe like 8 years ago now, and that's when we realized that the designation was missing. Not aware of a camp.
There is a camp along that shore, but it might be just outside of the city. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good information that we will look into. Okay, so that's really the extent of the changes. The last one isn't really a change, it's just a clarification that all of the marine waters below the ordinary high water mark do have a aquatic shoreline environment designation, but that just really wasn't very clear on the map itself. So we're just making that clear so that people that are proposing development within, below ordinary high water mark, that they are aware that there are specific development standards for that designation. So continuing with the summary of the text amendments, moving to chapter 5, that's the old numbering scheme again, in the Shoreline Master Program, but that covers shoreline environments and associated policies. So these proposed changes here are all ones that were identified to just clarify and also address, some of them are to address state law changes, but let me just read these really quick to make sure there's nothing I want to. There was some changes in state law to aquaculture allowances, and so there were some changes we needed to make to the SMP to be consistent with that. I think since 2010, fish pens have been prohibited, I believe. And so we had to update our SMP to be consistent with the new state law that governs fish pen and aquaculture type uses. So those are changes in the aquatic designation. The conservancy designation had a couple of changes, including the map amendment that we just talked about, from urban to conservancy, and then Lake Erie legal description for a small area of shorelines previously undesignated. So those are the two map amendments that we're talking about. So in this section of the SMP under conservancy, they're not really legal descriptions, but I guess they are, but they're a way of describing, in addition to the map, the areas that have these different shoreline environment designations. So it's not like a legal description that you'd see on a survey, but it uses like parcel numbers and intersections of parcels to actually describe in words the extent of these designations. So when we make a change on the map, we have to make a change to those descriptions as well. So that's kind of what this is talking about. In the shoreline residential designation, there were some clarifications proposed to how lot calculations should be made. So there, in the past, in reviewing building permits for new homes in the shoreline residential environment, there are some maximum impervious surface coverage limitations, and we found that that could be a little bit confusing for folks on how to do those calculations. So we tried to make some changes there to clarify how those calculations are done. And then these other two items are the map amendments, again, that we already talked about, changing the descriptions. This is so I talked about the Department of Ecology initial determination of consistency, and this comes from that document. I mentioned that they had, Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Ecology had some concerns about the change to shoreline residential right along the shoreline adjacent to the canneries and the aquatic designation, because that is a state constitutionally established harbor area, which has some special restrictions and allowances under state law that kind of, go beyond what we can regulate under the SMP, but we want to make sure that changes that we're making to our SMP aren't going to be inconsistent with the harbor area requirements. This was a change to the text that would go along with the change to the map designation, and it basically is ensuring that uses that are accessory to the overwater use of those historic cannery structures. It's making sure that accessory uses can occur within the landward area that would now be designated shoreline residential. So if that makes sense, making sure we're not precluding different types of support or accessory uses that can help those cannery structures, future uses of those continue. And there's some, bookends on what those types of uses can be. So these are just some more changes to the urban shoreline environment designation. As we're administering the SMP on different projects, development projects and permits, we find mistakes. We find, inconsistencies between the map and the legal descriptions. And so these are just fixing some of those discrepancies. Chapter 5 has, we're still in the shoreline environments and associated policies. So table 5.12 is the shoreline use and modification matrix and development standards. So it's kind of like our permitted use table that we have in the zoning code, but it's for shoreline, the different shoreline designations and uses that are allowed within each of those. And this is proposing some changes to that to address above water aquaculture projects being allowed as a conditional use in some limited circumstances. I think there's some uses that are occurring, and I don't know if they are anymore, but there's like sea cucumber, some sort of sea cucumber use that was occurring in one of those canneries, and we thought it would be good to address that type of use in the SMP and make it clear that above water aquaculture isn't the same as in water aquaculture, and create some special rules and procedures for allowing that type of use on existing overwater structures. We're almost done. So Chapter 6 includes all of the environmental protection general regulations for properties in shoreline jurisdiction. 6.5 includes our vegetation conservation standards. So these are regulations that apply to every new development within shoreline jurisdiction. There are requirements for preserving, retaining existing vegetation that is close to the ordinary high water mark, which is the most beneficial for those shoreline resources and functions. And those are in our existing SMP. So it talks about conserving and replanting and maintaining newly planted shoreline vegetation to improve functions and values. The changes that are proposed are for consistency, just referencing the consistent height of new trees that are planted. There were some inconsistencies there. And then also a requirement that subdivision of land not require significant vegetation removal. And then we also updated our allowances for tree and vegetation trimming, within the shoreline setback, clarified those, and added some restrictions and clarifications that new vegetation removal within the shoreline setback is not allowed to create views. Maintenance of existing views is permitted, but not to create new views. And so we clarified that in the SMP, and then also added some new, if I'm recalling correctly, some new submittal requirements so that when people want to propose vegetation maintenance within shoreline, it identifies what is required to be submitted as part of a application.
Dr. Martin?
Regarding that tree and vegetation trimming, that was a pretty big issue. I think it was last year on the Guimas Trail, where some pretty major trimming, if you want to call it that, took place. Are there teeth to that is there teeth to that regulation? Because they really did a number on that trail.
Yeah, that was not a great outcome. And yes, there are teeth. There are, the permitting and review provisions are there to make sure that what's being proposed is consistent with SMP. And then, yes, there are follow-up inspections to make sure that what was actually done was consistent with the what was permitted. And the SMP actually has its own enforcement provisions as well that do reference the code, I believe, but also they are enforcement provisions that go kind of above and beyond what the code enforcement in Title 20 includes. But yes, there are teeth, and in that particular situation, we did work with that particular situation to ensure that things were remedied.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mills?
I think I know, or I'm familiar with what you're alluding to, and my understanding is that that was part of a 3-year cycle in a 3-way agreement between the Homeowners Association, easements on individual properties along there, and the city, that the planned work was approved by all parties, but the execution of what was approved was where the failure occurred. So
I won't disagree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was reviewed, it complied with the requirements. And yes, there are certain areas within town where prior to the current SMP, projects were approved with a different legal agreement, private or a native growth protection easement agreement that allows for the different property owners in certain areas to manage and maintain. It kind of spells out what is allowed and on what timetable, and so those still apply in those situations. This also applies to those situations, as well as any new applications that aren't covered by those NGPE easements. Those are only in a couple different areas of town.
yeah, that's one of my overriding concerns is we seem to have a hodgepodge along the channel that's kind of developed individually or organically, to excuse the pun, so that we have a real inconsistency as we go along the channel. So I hope that what we're doing here is trying to, as we evolve moving forward, get better consistency.
Yes, I mean, I think that what's intended with the amendments is to clearly identify what is required for somebody that wants to conduct that type of maintenance, and requires. We'll get into more detail about specifically what the changes were, but it was intended to say, yes, a permit is required, or an authorization from the city is required to do this specific type of work, even if you're not clearing. If you're just trimming trees, that still has an impact on functions and values of the shoreline, so it requires review for consistency with the SMP. And so we also wanted to make sure that the types of, techniques that are used are those that will maintain the health of the tree, and there are certain requirements for the amount of limbs that can be removed within a certain amount of time. It gets very detailed, and it's complicated to administer, but it's important, to get that right.
The problem with vegetation is once you cut down a tree, it's pretty hard to put it back.
Yep.
And so it almost requires, in this example we were talking about, it was an execution problem. All the parties agreed, and then the execution failed. And they did come back and try to remedy the damage. But it almost takes real-time supervision on the execution end, because like I said, if you cut down a 75-foot tree,
Yep.
you can't put back a 75-foot tree, so.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So I'm sure we'll have more discussions about that particular area of the amendments in the future. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was just integration of the critical areas regulations into the Shoreline Master Program. So in the current SMP, in the 2010 SMP, the critical areas that are located within shorelines, so shorelines in themselves are not designated as critical areas technically, unless they contain certain features like salmon spawning habitat, kelp, forage fish spawning areas. But just having a shoreline itself is not always considered to be a critical area. So we have to look further and see what else is there to determine applicability of the critical areas regulations. So anyways, the current SMP has an appendix at the very end of that standalone document that has all of the regulations that apply to critical areas within shoreline jurisdiction. So these are different from our critical areas regulations in Title 19 that apply to land that is outside of shoreline jurisdiction. They're generally kind of the same in terms of what is allowed and buffers and that sort of thing, but there are some differences under the Shoreline Management Act, goals and policies, and also procedures that don't allow us to directly take from our critical areas regulations in Title 19 and just copy paste them into the SMP or even directly cross-reference them. So it gets a little bit complicated, and it's always been difficult to figure out what the best way to integrate those critical area protections into the SMP is, and that's still something that we're looking at. But anyways, the 2010 SMP has just a separate standalone appendix that governs critical areas within shoreline, so wetlands, geologically hazardous areas, fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. So if a property includes any of those features, you go to Appendix A of the SMP to determine what applies. When we updated our critical areas regulations in the 2021 time period, as part of our periodic update of the comp plan and development regulations, that was going on at the same time as our initial work on the SMP update. And so the plan was to take the updated critical areas regulations and reference them in the SMP. So adopt, sort of incorporate by reference. That plan didn't work very well because there were appeals of the critical areas regulations, so we couldn't accomplish that cross-referencing. So now we are at a point where we need to, again, figure out what the best way to integrate those critical areas regulations into the SMP is. We're going to be updating our critical areas regulations again because it's time to do that. And so as these two processes move forward, we'll be figuring out how to harmonize those and how to best protect critical areas within shoreline jurisdiction. So that'll be a conversation to be continued. But the way that it's drafted right now in the SMP is probably going to change. So I didn't spend a lot of time in this presentation talking about that. Okay. I already covered these. So Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 are the specific use policies and development regulations. So different uses that are permitted in the shoreline jurisdiction have additional regulations depending on the use type. We talked about aquaculture. And then there are some clarifications for docks, piers, and floats. So we see a lot of maintenance and repair and replacement proposals for docks, piers, and floats. So like an example is the Skyline area. There are tons of existing docks, and that all need, maintenance and repair from time to time. And also, our people are trying to replace piling that are creosote coated with more environmentally friendly options, steel. And so those types of proposals come in a lot. And so we're proposing some changes in the SMP to make it more straightforward what exactly is allowed with what level of detail in an application to encourage people to continue to make environmental improvements to those docks and piers and pilings, but also, not making things so difficult to get through the permitting process so that people avoid it or don't make those improvements. So anyways, there are some proposed changes to those sections that are intended to ease the process and make things more clear. Okay. So that's my quick summary without going through 85 slides of all of the kind of key changes that are currently proposed in the most recent draft of the SMP. So what's next? So now that everybody's up to speed and we all know what's happened and what is proposed right now and sort of what we need to do moving forward, staff will be determining a timeline for adoption, which we'll be publishing in the future, and most likely what the process will include is updating a public participation plan. So the original process had a public participation plan, and we would update that to make sure that folks know what the, we're kind of restarting this process. Here's what to expect moving forward through adoption. We'll be looking at the gap analysis that was completed in 2020 and identifying changes to state law and local policies and regulations since then, and identifying if any updates need to be made based on those changes. Staff is working on coordinating with ecology to determine the next steps forward for the state review process. And ultimately, this would all lead to another draft, an updated SMP draft for public, that would be published for public review and comment, including integration of the critical areas regulations. So that's what's coming. We don't know exact timelines right now or exactly, how things are going to look, but we'll be providing that information soon, I'm sure. Just for Planning Commission and members of the public, There was a web page specific to the SMP update that was developed back in 2019 when this process was started, and there are all of the documents that were produced associated with that process are accessible on that web page. There's the address. If anybody has questions or comments or wants to talk, has problems accessing anything, please contact me. And there's my email address and phone number. And that's all I have on that topic. Thank you for bearing with me.
Quick question. Were all the legal challenges back 5-6 years ago, have they all been resolved?
The challenges to the critical areas regulations have been resolved, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Libby.
Thank you.
We do have a question.
If we're going to update that gap analysis, are we planning on hiring a consultant again?
We believe that staff can probably do that work in-house, so at this time, that's not the plan.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Planning Department update.
Good evening, Planning Commission. First, I'd like to welcome Jill Underwood. I don't know if anybody's mentioned that yet. We have a brand new Planning Commissioner that sat down with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our detailed discussions today. I'd like to say it's not always like this, but sometimes it is. Thank you, Libby, for explaining the restart of the Shoreline Master Program update process. This has been something that we've been looking forward to taking care of after getting through with the comprehensive plan process, which of course we finished at the end of the year. And we are now working with appellants through the Growth Management Hearings Board appeal of the comprehensive plan and the development regulations that were that the city adopted. So that's something that Libby and I are working a lot on. Not nearly as much as our legal department is working on this, working on that topic quite a bit, as well as several other appeals brought by the same individuals of our shoreline, or I'm sorry, our stormwater plan. They've appealed the SEPA for that. And other things that I'm forgetting at the moment. There's several. So moving on, the other things going on in our department is hopefully you had a chance to watch the city council meeting last night. All of the departments, except for the library department, library was not available to present, gave a update of what's been going on for the past quarter and what we anticipate going on for the next year. So went a little long, you know, when it's 10 to 15 minutes for every department. And so if you fast forward, we're the second to last department to present. I think that was somewhere in the 8 o'clock hour, I'm sure. But if you don't want to watch it, I'll give you a quick little update about what's going on in our department. The week before, if you watched the city council meeting, the mayor gave his state of the city presentation, and one of the things that he mentioned was he was going to be issuing an executive order around permit streamlining. So he did issue that executive order the next day, so about a week ago. And so in that executive order, it's requiring the planning department to take over some functions that are currently performed by Public Works, such as processing vacations, such as processing clear and grade permits, and also moving fire plan review to the building department. So a lot of little structural changes like that, moving around things mostly to the planning department, and then also asking that the planning department take over stormwater processing, not doing the review ourselves. That's a third party. So a lot of new tasks have been moved to the planning department, and so we're going to be adjusting to that and coming up with procedures and making, the whole idea of that is to make those processes work a little faster, with the idea of, like, in the permitting world, the planning and building departments do permits all day long, all the time. At least, what you see here, you see the long-range planning part, where we discuss our long-range plans and code updates. We also have our whole permitting department that does land use applications and site plan for other projects, such as building permits. So that department, that part of the planning department is going to be putting on a full court press to get some of these things done in the next 30 to 90 days as put in the executive order. Other things include making code amendments to make certain permits and processes move a little faster. So those sorts of things will be coming to the Planning Commission when for making code changes, largely, unless they're procedural code changes that affect procedure. Those don't necessarily go to the Planning Commission, but if it's related to land use, like the things that we talked about at the public hearing today, those would come to the Planning Commission. I encourage you to go to the website and look up the executive order. On the website, if you go to under Mayor, so under governing tab to Mayor, and he's got a couple of executive orders there, and this is the 2026-02. So that's what we're doing. So I spoke a little bit about that at the city council last night. I also spoke a little bit about some of the things that the permitting department's already been doing to improve permitting streamlining. And largely what we've been able to achieve over the past several months is building up the internal permitting process of SmartGov. So what our departments see when interacting with our permitting software, it's not really software, it's an application, but how it works internally, and making sure that all of the functions are there that we need to make the system flow properly. Now that we've got that mostly tightened up, staff's moving on to working on the external facing things. So we're in particular, they're working on checklists for all the different permitting types. And those will be documents that when an applicant submits for their permit, they'll have a checklist that they can go through before they actually enter the portal and start checking boxes and filling in fields and uploading documents. So it helps people understand what they're going to be submitting before they actually go into the portal and start having to do things online. In addition, it just makes it a little more understandable process. We'll also be making improvements to our outward-facing web page, and as possible, improving the user interface of the portal, as well as the steps to get there, to making documents available for people that are applying. So improving the user experience is the end goal of that. So that's largely what's been going on. I do encourage you to look at my presentation from last night. I talked about permitting volumes, and it has some interesting data about how many showing how many permits we've gotten each year over the past 20 years since 2006. We've gone back to then. And we have a slide showing the types of housing units. So, you know, these permits are all based on housing units. So you can see back in, you know, 2006, a lot of single-family homes, and then that number tapered down a little bit and we had a spike in permits where we were seeing more townhomes and cottage-type uses in apartments. And then a few years ago, once interest rates started to climb rapidly, you can see a very stark correlation between interest rates and the number of permits that we've received, and that's Skagit County as well. So there's a nice graph showing the inverse relationship between building permits for units follows the same inverse path of the interest rates. A picture's worth a 1,000 words in this case, but as those interest rates go up and down, so the permits generally follow that. So I encourage you to look at that, and that is all I have for you tonight.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Mills?
Probably could be answered by looking at the video from last night, but I know your group is working on processes to do more with less and improve productivity, but you also have cited new work coming in as a result of the executive order. Was there any resources that followed those tasks as they came from other departments to your department?
They were not identified in the executive order, no.
In real life, are there going to be any?
Well, I mean, it's kind of shifting work. So a lot of the things don't necessarily cost much, but I think, we're keeping an eye on the additive effect of, having more work in the planning department. Does that require additional staffing in the department? And so we're definitely aware of that and keeping an eye on how that's going to affect our ability to continue to offer services. One other thing that the executive order, I apologize, I forgot, asked us to do is to examine our fee structure, what we're charging and how much it costs for us to actually run the permitting center, with the end goal of having the permitting center pay its own way. So, all of the wages for people that do permitting, that are involved in permitting, being paid for by the fees that we receive through permits. That gets a little complicated. It sounds pretty simple, but it gets a little complicated pretty quick, especially when permit volumes are down. We're not, does that mean we start increasing fees for permits because we're getting lower volumes of permits? That might have the opposite effect and cause people to do to submit less permits. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. And so we'll be doing some averaging, and we're just starting that work. We've got 90 days to do it.
You could be saved by really high interest rates, huh?
Rhetorical. No. Higher interest rates, not new. As the chart shows, high interest rates are not good for permit volumes, and we need housing. I mean, you hear the city council talk about this a lot, and that's what our 2025 comp plan update attempted to make rules easier for housing to be built, and encourage more housing for people on, especially in lower income brackets. So we're not just doing that for lip service. We'd actually like to see things change and see more housing being built so people can live and work in Anacortes.
The mayor did point out that it's sure nice to get sales tax on construction, and when construction isn't happening, it's also measurable in the revenue rolling in. So, and not only the permits, but the sales tax that it generates.
To the extent we're successful in having the permit fees cover the cost of processing the permits, then you
Yeah, but the
live on
city
it.
would like that sales tax for all the other things it does also.
Yeah, Commissioner Drusky is exactly right. Traditionally, sales tax received from building materials, from the processes, people actually building and buying materials in town, delivered to town, because the sales tax is at point of delivery. So if it's delivered to Anacortes, that's where the sales tax is collected. So the city does see an increase in sales tax, and that's really one of the more significant, sales tax is one of the more significant drivers of our general fund, which funds most of the portions of the city. Not to say that, the planning commission or the planning department is tasked with increasing sales tax but it is a nice benefit, and it is something that is necessary to sustain the government services.
On that happy note, maybe we'll call it an evening. Or,
Excuse me. We need to address Ryan not being here today.
I'm sorry,
Ryan being
Oh.
absent. We need to vote on that.
did anybody know where he is, or did he ask for an excuse? We haven't heard from him, so I guess we're not being asked to excuse him. Can we excuse him after the fact, a month from now, the next meeting? Okay, in that case, his absence is noted, and he's not excused. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so we're adjourned at 8:22. Thank you, everybody. Nice to have you here. It's probably the longest meeting we've had in quite a while.